Let's go.
What's up, guys? Welcome to whatever episode this is of the Chris Donaldson Project. I am your host. My name is the Chris Donaldson, as I'm known around the internet. And this show literally is built around you. And here's who you are. If you're in sales, if you run a business, if you're in a leadership position over your household, over a business itself, if you're in any way, shape, or form trying to do better at what you can manage, this podcast is for you. Let me explain briefly why we call it the Chris Donaldson Project. And it's simple because everything that we do is a project. It's unfinished, which includes me as a person. So I'm coming here bringing you through the journey of not only me as a person, but our business and our homes as they are being developed, as they're growing, as they're scaling too. So if you come along for the ride, you're going to see the good, the bad, the ugly, but most importantly, the lessons. And hopefully you'll be able to learn, identify, and you'll be able to see things that we all go through together. And my goal here is to help you avoid some of those easy pitfalls that maybe we've gone through that you haven't. I also want you to understand the difference between what makes successful leaders and what doesn't, what makes successful salespeople and what doesn't, what is good marketing and what isn't. I'm a pretty well-rounded person, and I want this podcast to be as well-rounded for you. So on this episode, we were talking about something in our office downstairs earlier. And so for those of you that don't know me, one of the main companies that I run is a real estate education company. So we do it all, right? Everything from real estate exam preparation to your continuing education to post-licensing to sales and marketing training. So really end to end is kind of the passion of what we do. And one of the things that I like to do, and I do it all the time, is to try to figure out what really is the disparity between a good real estate agent and a bad real estate agent. And more importantly than that, what is it that separates the good real estate agent from the bad real estate agent? And we had a meeting earlier where I was discussing the 20/80 principle of sales. And so those of you that have ever taken any sales training, if you haven't, by the way, I'm going to talk about that you need to. But if you haven't, the 20/80 rule is not the Pareto principle where 20% of what you do is going to produce 80% of the results. It's actually that 20% of the people produce 80% of the results. So if I were to take a sliver of a sales organization, there's that small 20% of top performers that are generally going to be doing 80% of the revenue, 80% of the business, 80% of the income. And so then you've got the majority of the company. So the other 80% of salespeople that are left fighting for that other 20% of revenue. Now, when people hear that, the problem is they hear it wrong. And the reason that they hear it wrong is because they hear it in the fashion that business is limited. Because I sort of set it up that way, the way that I said it. In other words, the other 80% of salespeople are fighting for the 20% that's left. Well, number one, if you heard it that way and you believe that, or you think you're one of those, we're going to talk about you have a problem that you need to fix. It's not the pipeline's problem. It's not the company's problem. It's not the industry's problem. It's not the economy's problem. It's actually yours. And the reason for that is what you haven't understood is you've got to go create more opportunity to have more opportunity. And so it's not that it's limited. It's that usually those 20% are out there creating that market that gives them the 80% revenue. But part of the issue that we are discovering is that the disparity is getting bigger. And in the real estate industry, it's not 20/80. It's not even 10/90. It's leaning in a lot of markets a lot more like 1% is doing 80% of the business. So what's incredibly interesting about that is that this, a few years back when we had to Occupy Wall Street and the 1% and all of these various things, well, I think they were completely wrong about what they were protesting, but they were right about one thing, that income disparity is getting wider. And It's happening in real estate. It's happening in most sales businesses. Like the bigger companies are getting bigger. The banks, as a result of all of that, have gotten bigger. There's less of them with more money. So when I'm studying an industry that I know best, and I look at real estate, for instance, I looked at a local board not too far from me that has 6,000 members. And so I did what I call the 1% study. I took the top 60, which would be 1% of 6,000 members. And guess what? Their production year to date was just over 80% of the total of the organization. I mean, that's like a holy shit moment. So it really is the 1%ers. And what I was discussing with my staff and what I want to talk to you guys about is, what is the reason? What is it that those 1% know that the others don't? Why is it that there's so few that are making so much? And again, it's not because of the economy. It's not because it's unfair. It's not because there's all these other factors. A lot of times it's because of you. And what I want to talk to you about today is that you got to start with what you can control. I mean, it's one of the most famous prayers in the Catholic faith, which I'm not Catholic, but you hear it said a lot in AA meetings, which I'm not a part of, but I know the prayer, and it's very important, right? It's give me the strength to change the things that I can. And what is it? How does the rest go? I'm drawing a blank. I know the last part is the wisdom to know the difference. So the courage to change the things I can, and something that what is the middle part? Because it's incredibly important. All right, let me close my eyes and go back to Catholic school and remember this here. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There it is. I had to close my eyes and go back to homework to remember that. But, you know, as funny as it might be that I couldn't remember that, that prayer is incredibly important. That statement is incredibly important because a lot of people forget about the part where you need to have the courage to change the things that you can. And I think far too often it's so easy to say, well, you know, I didn't make it in real estate because there were just those guys were too big and they took all the business. I mean, that's bullshit. Or, you know, the market's just against me and there's no way that a new guy can make the money. That's bullshit. And I don't know any other way to say it. So what I've got here are a couple. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I've got a couple of what I call the Super 8. And the Super 8 is something that I've been teaching for years, which is really the Super 8 qualities of winning salespeople. In other words, this is the way that winners, that 1%, or even the 20 out of the 80, the way that they think and look at things differently than the rest. And I think you need to understand that it starts, if you're not making the money that you want, you don't have the career that you want, you don't have the stuff that you want, you have to control what you can, and that's definitely yourself. And so the Super 8 is a series of these, but the first of them I want to emphasize is something that we all do, which is it's a natural inclination as a human because it lets you off the hook. And that is you need to learn to respect yourself and stop insulting yourself. And here's what I mean. Have you ever done this? Have you ever just said, well, I'm an idiot? Or have you ever stubbed your toe and said, I'm so stupid, and then somebody says, hey, can you do this for me? Like, I don't know. For me, I'm a terrible chef. Like, you put me in the kitchen, I'm going to ruin it. It's not something I'm good at. You don't want me near it. Most of the time, when I offer help in the kitchen, the ladies in my life are like, you know what? Just go sit down because I'm going to make more problems than I'm going to solve. But the point is that if you are just taking on something, like if I just go into a kitchen and say, I'm a terrible cook, I can't do this, I promise you I'm never going to be able to do it. But you know what? I've made it this far in life. I've clearly cooked myself quite a few meals. Clearly, I've got at least the basic survival instincts of how to make food, even though it may not be restaurant quality. But the idea that people just go into situations and already tell themselves, I can't, I won't, I'm an idiot, I don't have the ability, you're already going to lose. So you've got to respect yourself first and understand that you were given the gift of life. You have tremendous opportunity and personality traits that you can use to succeed. I mean, tremendous. For instance, think of all of the adjectives in the English language you can use to describe someone. I mean, I have a sheet where I think there's over like 500 terms. And they're everything from enthusiastic to driven to intelligent to luscious. I mean, you got all these words. We're all born with something that's positive. We're many positive traits, but we're trained to focus on what we're not. And if you start understanding that, you got to respect yourself, respect the fact that you're going to make mistakes, especially when you're new to anything, and the fact that that's okay. And everybody else did too. And move forward, get better, understand that it's part of the process. But man, I like if I could crawl into the heads of people, I can see it on their faces. If I could hear the stuff they were telling themselves, they wouldn't say that out loud to anyone else on earth, but they'll say it to themselves about themselves. So I need you to understand you got to respect yourself, because listen, if you're in a sales presentation, like let's just use real estate as an example because I know it well. If I'm sitting in your living room and you're considering selling your house and you're considering using me as your real estate agent, and I'm thinking in my head the whole time, I can't do this, I'm a disaster, I haven't been doing this long enough, I don't know what I'm doing, I hope he doesn't ask me that, really, this is terrible, I'm scared, I hope I don't pee my pants, like you're just going through this whole negative stuff, it's going to manifest itself in what you're doing when you're discussing the possibility. As opposed to if you're sitting there and you're respecting yourself, your ability, your skills, you've practiced, you're confident, even if you don't get the listing as an example, you have an infinite better chance by respecting yourself than you do if you don't. Okay, so that's my first one. You've got to respect yourself. I do not understand. People have got to stop focusing on what they're not, start focusing on what they are. The second, and probably equally important that you can affect on your own, is you've got to have persistence. I think that, I wrote a blog article on this one time, and Art, let's link this with this podcast episode with the notes. I wrote an entire blog article on the power of persistence. And in that blog article, I tell an oft-told story about former President Teddy Roosevelt. Now, for those of you that, even if you can just Google it, don't Google if you're driving around in your car, but if you're familiar with Teddy Roosevelt, not FDR, the Roosevelt before that, he was the big, burly, tough president. He was the mountain man. He was the guy that, if you saw pictures of him, he was outdoors, beard, rough and tumble. Like if my president got in a fight with your president, my president's going to win. That was Teddy Roosevelt. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that he grew up as a scrawny, picked on, bullied type of kid. And he had to make himself into that big, burly, manly president that he ultimately became. And the story is pretty interesting because he was having one of those moments as a kid where I just can't do this and I'm not big enough and all of this stuff. And his father said something like, if you're not big enough, go make yourself big enough. And basically what he started doing was working out way back before this was popular, way back before there was a gym on every corner. He was skiing, he was doing push-ups, he was running, he was wrestling bears. That's real. He was doing all that crazy stuff. He turned himself in to the big, burly, trusty man that people could vote for as president of the United States. So what I'm sharing with you guys is he had the persistence to continue to go on, to continue to go on, to continue to build, to continue to get bigger. And far too many people, like the first sign of trouble, they run and they're done. I've seen so many real estate agents, their first listing presentation is a disaster and they quit. Like, why? That's a funny story you can tell one day. You should go to the next seller and tell them exactly what happened with the last one and flip it around. I mean, the idea that you're not going to fail is just crazy. And you got to have a sense of humor about it sometimes, and you got to have the persistence. You've heard it before. You're going to get told more times than you get told yes. Here's my favorite thing about real estate. All right, I think you'll appreciate this. My favorite thing about real estate's dominated by females. Statistically, the average realtor from the last statistics is a 54-year-old female. Okay, and they make up about 60% of those with a realtor license, maybe a little bit more. I mean, it's going to vary. Okay, so let's just say the majority of real estate agents are women. Yet, when it comes to sales and it comes to building their business and it comes to why they aren't part of the top percentage, they always say, well, I don't want to be too salesy. I don't want to push too hard. I don't want to, pursue them and drive them crazy. And I always ask them, well, how did your husband get you? How did your boyfriend get you? I bet you really enjoyed being wooed and pursued. Yeah, but that's different. No, it isn't. If your husband wasn't persistent, how many realtors I've talked to over the years, hey, your husband, how many times did he ask you out before you went out with him? Oh, that's a funny story. It always freaking is, right? And a lot of times it was never the first time. Or, I'd met him before and didn't like him, whatever. The guy wins through persistence. You know that because you demanded it as his mate. However, for some reason, we have this disconnect. Then when we go over into our business world as real estate agents, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Well, guess what? Don't forget, okay? You are selling yourself to potential clients, especially in real estate, on how you're going to sell their home by how you sell yourself to them. How persistent you are, how much you care, your professionalism, and so on. Because if I am persistent in getting your listing, you're going, man, I hope he works half that hard to actually sell my house, which of course I will. Persistence is part of the deal. I mean, if everybody just got told yes or got what they wanted or everything happened the way they wanted, exactly when they wanted, how they wanted, dude, what fun would that be? And everybody would be successful. Yay, it's like a, happy-go-lucky place, but that's not reality. So if you want to understand, there's only 20% of you or so that are ever going to be persistent enough to succeed. So if you're sitting back and you're wondering what's the difference, you have to have that quality. You have to be persistent. You cannot stop when somebody says no. Because sometimes no doesn't mean no, it means not right now. And the opportunities you could miss because you sent one email and they didn't respond are just ridiculous. All right. So the first one was respect yourself. The second one is make sure that you're persistent. And then the third one, it kind of goes in line and kind of meets these in the middle. And that is, by far, you've got to let yourself know that it's okay to make mistakes. And what we say all the time is that you're either going to win, so get what you want, or you're going to learn a lesson so that it doesn't happen again, or that you're going to get a little bit better. But this concept of everything is win or lose is the exact mindset where people fail, because everything's not win or lose. It's either win or learn a lesson, right? So, for instance, if I spend a fortune on a new advertising campaign and I get the best creative director, I got a team full of arts, I got all the money in the world, I got the strategy and the consultants, and we put out this whole thing and it just falls flat and I lose money. Well, that's terrible and that sucks. But if you've got enough to scrape together to keep on going, you learned a lesson there. And so one of the most valuable things that people should always do is to go back and look at the failure, analyze it, understand what happened so that it doesn't happen again. The biggest mistake is repeating the same failure. I tell our staff all the time in training, listen, you're not going to get fired for making a mistake that doesn't violate the core values of the company. So if you didn't steal, but you said the wrong thing, you're not going to get fired. You're going to sit down either with me or one of our managers or a trainer, and they're going to teach you, hey, remember, this is not how we say that. It's this. Like, there should never be that element of fear. However, that's what accountability is about. But if they do the same thing again the next day, then clearly that employee is not learning. Clearly, they either think their way is better, or they're what we call, the scouting report says, they're not coachable. See, one of the biggest things that you look for in talent. Now, I'm no pro scout, but if you're looking at football players and baseball players, and there's a big old chunk of their scouting report, it's how coachable they are, because that shows how willing they are to accept improvement and improvement language and moving forward. And guess what? If you got all the talent in the world, but you will not accept coaching, your career is going to have a lower ceiling than somebody that may be less talented that will work hard and accept coaching. Because this idea that you know everything and that your way is better, well, if your way keeps failing, it's obviously not better. And second, and more important, the learning is part of the game. See, that's where it goes from being smart to being wise. Wisdom comes from you have intelligence and you have experience to connect to it. You can't be wise when you're young. So it's important to understand that you've got to respect yourself. You've got to understand that you're not winning and losing. You are literally just learning, especially when you're new at something, okay? And persistence is necessary. I mean, look, if you want to go analytical about it, in marketing, it's somewhere between 7 to 15 touches to get somebody to buy from you. At the time today is like the end of Prime Day, I think, for Amazon. And how much money do you think Amazon spends marketing to you in order to get your business? It's more than you think. And just yesterday on Prime Day, which is an entire sale that Amazon invented. They invented a day, they invented a sale, they invented all of this to get you on their site during the doldrums of summer when you're normally on vacation to get you shopping. Well, guess what? They did such a good job that their website crashed yesterday. Amazon's website crashed. So if you're a business owner, your website's ever crashed, hey, so does Amazon's, okay? But here's the second part. Estimates are that they lost anywhere from $130 to $180 million in revenue because they created demand by the consumer, and the consumer actually spent money on eBay or Walmart or some other retailer because Amazon had spent all that money to develop the juice, and then their website crashed. Well, let me ask you a question. You think they're going to learn a lesson from that? You think it's going to happen the same way again? Of course not. You know who Amazon is because they don't make the same mistakes again and again, right? So even if it's a successful mistake, we're too big for our own cloud platform. Well, then we've got to do something. So everybody makes mistakes. Businesses, sometimes your success is a mistake. But anyway, to connect these things back, if you're in the 1% that's generally doing the majority of the revenue, then you know this stuff, right? You're already persistent. You already you're probably overconfident, which is fine. It's better than the alternative, et cetera. But if you're not, you need to start with you, because the one thing you can absolutely control is yourself and how you treat yourself. And if you don't have that right, the rest of the formula really doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Because you can watch 1 million training videos, listen to 1 million podcasts like this, look at YouTube. You can do all that stuff. You can see all the strategies and everything at the end of the day. But if you don't believe in you, how are you going to sell someone else to believe in you and then sell them the story about what you're going to sell to them? It's the first step of the 4. So my advice to you guys is that I'm passionate about those that want to be part of the small number of successful salespeople, whether it's real estate, businesses, or whatever. I'm doing this podcast and everything that we do because I want you to learn from our failures. I want you to learn from our mistakes. I want you to also learn from the things that we do right. And secondly, I want you to know that there's people out there that are looking out for you. We're trying to break down the barrier between you and the information that you need. But the one thing that we cannot do, the one thing that I cannot do, is do the reps for you. I can't do the work. I can tell you what you need to do. I can give you advice. I can show you what's worked. I can give you statistics. I can share experts, but you got to do the work. So start today. Start today. Monitor the stuff that you tell yourself and start eliminating the negative stuff. That's the easiest way to start, because what you're telling yourself in between your own two ears is as important as anything else on earth. So thank you guys for listening. Again, this is the Chris Donaldson, and the only thing that you need to do, the only thing that we need, the only thing that I ask is that, number one, that you go review us wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, on iTunes, Stitcher, Anchor, wherever. Give us a review. Let us know that you enjoyed it. It gives us the fuel to keep going. And number two, come on over to thechrisdonaldson.com/podcast. Come see what we're doing and hang out with me on social. Because look, the whole purpose of this is to break down that barrier. So let me know what's working for you. We'll see you next time.
Turn up. Let's go.